Has imposed a nighttime curfew across the country after it toppled veteran leader Omar al-Bashir today. The country's defence minister says the country will be governed by a military council for the next 2 years, and after that, elections will follow. He says the former leader's been arrested and, quote, been detained in a place of safety, end quote. Thousands of people flocked to anti-government protests in the capital Khartoum to celebrate the ousting of al-Bashir, but organisers of the protests have rejected the coup, saying it was conducted by the regime itself. Since December, Sudan's been rocked by protests sparked by skyrocketing bread prices and an economic crisis that's led to fuel and cash shortages. In 2009, Bashir was indicted by the International Criminal Court on multiple counts of genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes committed allegedly in Sudan's Western Darfur region, in which 300,000 people died. The court followed an indictment with a warrant of arrest. Bashir continued to travel to several countries, including, you remember, South Africa, Kenya and Egypt. Ibrahim Deen is a researcher at the Afro-Middle East Centre. He's been following developments for us tonight. Mr. Deen, good evening to you. Thank you for your time today. Omar al-Bashir has been seen to have his grip firmly on power, and yet he seems to have been ousted today really quite quickly.
It's quite surprising. Until last week, we were saying that the protests were actually decreasing, the geographical scale was decreasing, but it seems as things changed on Saturday, on the anniversary of the ouster of Jafar Nimeri, the 1985 ouster. And what happened was the protesters strategically calculated for sitting outside the army headquarters. And because the security services or security apparatus violently cracked down, military soldiers began to defect. And, on yesterday or this morning at 3 o'clock, basically al-Bashir was informed that, the military was closing rank and ousting him. I mean, mainly in an attempt for the military to protect its own interests. So it's not, as we say, it's not necessarily substantive change. Yes, it's just the military, the face of the regime saying it.
I mean, for outsiders, for people who've been watching this perhaps from, Johannesburg, Cape Town or Durban, it seems to have happened very quickly. Have there been other changes in that society or in the military over the last few months or years maybe that have led to these developments, something that perhaps we missed?
Okay, so the protest started in December, mainly as a result of, basically the floating or the falling of the Sudanese pound, which caused the tripling in prices. And basically these economic grievances then mutated into calls for Bashir's ousted because, Bashir has been there for the past 50 years and many were fed up of the corruption, dictatorial tendencies. What happened prior to this, though, in September was Bashir did, rearranged practice within the military. And so this may be part of, the causes as to why the military defected so rapidly in such a quick manner.
It's almost a classic case. If you have rising food prices, the leader becomes vulnerable no matter who they are. And a leader in a situation like he was in charge of, where he certainly wasn't elected in a way that we would necessarily say was democratic, he's also got to keep the army on side. If you fail those two tests, you're suddenly very vulnerable. Yes,
and he tried. He had a reshuffle in February, which basically gave 16 of the 18 provinces to the military. His vice president is the current president, Awad Ibn Auf. And so, he tried, but unfortunately, I think the military saw the pressure being too much. His time was going to end anyway in 2020, and so the military decided that the best way to actually keep support for the military while, changing the regime was to actually support the ouster. And, I think it's not worked so far. Protesters have actually managed to see through it. Actually, big protests currently calling for the military to actually go and for a proper civilian transitional government to intervene.
Now, Ibrahim, we've seen similar situations over the last 5-10 years where a leader who's been in power for a long time suddenly ousted from power, and yet the real elite, who are the sort of power behind the power, the deep state, if we can use that phrase, actually still stay in power. There are various examples of this. Could the army or the elite there stay in power in some way in Sudan, even though the person at the top has changed tonight?
Al-Bashir has been in charge for 50 years, and much of the rule was as a result of the military and the party. Some of the party officials have been arrested, but most of these key individuals still stay in their positions. The military is still in control of 16 of 18 states. So, currently it does seem as if the military will remain in power, or at least in control for the foreseeable future, unless, of course, the Sudanese population of SPA, which is leading the protests, comes up with a more, basically pushes a candidate that it will be able to secure, or transitional concessional transitional candidate. Currently it doesn't seem as if that's the case at the moment. So the military is still in control, and it's very likely that if the protests don't continue, they will continue to be in control.
So 3 months of a state of emergency, a curfew in Sudan tonight. One would imagine the military wouldn't really want to give up its grip. It will keep a very close eye on things. The next 3 months could be absolutely crucial.
That's the fear. The fear is that previously, even though al-Bashir was the head of the military regime, marching against him is marching against him. Whereas now marching directly against the military, and the military may, not be so supportive of such instances as it was, in this week. So it is. The constitution has been suspended. What does need to happen, though, is I think the protesters and the political forces, the Consensus for Change, do need to issue a roadmap that is both, realistic, and also a roadmap that allows for consensus candidates for a transitional period, because a transitional period controlled by the military, as is currently the case, will actually ensure that the military could remain in control, similar to what's happened in Egypt.
Ibrahim Deen, thank you very much indeed. Researcher at the Afro-Middle East Centre.
Thank you for having me.